All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to me ranting and arguing with a person that quite literally doesn't know I exist. Jody, what do you mean by that? Well, let me tell you. First things first, if you're wondering why I sound more awesome today, I literally have just uh, gotten up because my sleep schedule is super screwed up. So my actual voice when I first wake up can be almost an octave lower than my regular speaking voice. So this is not me artificially lowering my voice. This is what I sound like when I wake up. As I do this, my pitch will raise because my vocal cords get warmed up. So I always point that out because I feel really weird when I speak this low, because I can go even lower, and it feels really weird because I feel like I'm like swallowing my voice and things like that, and I'm not. It's just my vocal cords aren't warmed up, so they're looser than they normally are, and the tighter your vocal cords, the higher the pitch. Anyway, ignore that. I am going to argue with Matt Colville now. Matt Colville doesn't know I exist. Matt Colville probably could care less that I have a problem with this particular take he has taken. And as I'm recording this, Matt Colville is on his Twitch channel explaining his idea behind this. And if I were to go there, I might get slightly better insights into what he is, what his take is here. And he might step back from what he said onto the Twitter and kind of explain it a little bit better. But I am simply going to be talking about the argument that he just made onto the Twitter, because he has made this same argument about different things quite a few times, and it always annoys the hell out of me because it reminds me of the mindset of a lot of 3E purists. If you don't know what that means, I call people that think not only that 3rd edition and 3.5 and Pathfinder, because they all effectively use the same rule system, are not only the best version of D&D, but every system after that has actively hurt D&D, and the only people that play systems after that are people that can't handle real D&D. This is not a 3E purist is not someone that prefers to play the 3rd edition. A 3E purist is someone that thinks 3rd edition was the pinnacle, and anyone that doesn't agree them is a plebe, is someone that doesn't understand how games are played, is the idea of baby games for babies. So Matt Colville made this little, I guess he had this little epiphany. Let me just read what he said. So he posts on Twitter, think about how different the game was in the 80s, referencing D&D. You had XP for every gold piece you found. That was the main way you leveled up. Find gold. But leveling up just got you more hit point and better stats. Want cool powers? You better find some magic items. I think this radically changes the motivation of the players. You were highly motivated to explore ancient ruins and brave terrible enemies, because that was the only way to make progress. Now, it sort of, and he capitalizes sort of, to put emphasis on the idea that that is the main point. Sort of, this isn't exclusive. Now, it sort of doesn't matter what your character does. You're going to get the same reward no matter what. Doesn't matter what choices you make. Just show up, roll enough dice, and you'll level up. You get the exact same reward as any other person playing that class. I think many of us just assume that participating in the narrative is its own reward. I'm not sure. I think you look at what the game rewards you for doing, and that's what players are going to do. If they're rewarded for finding loot, they will risk their character's life and limb to get it. If you use milestone XP, or really level advancement, but no one calls it that, aren't you just sort of rewarding the player for showing up? I wonder if this isn't what lies at the root of my players aren't engaged problem. The system isn't designed to award engagement. I think this deserves a live stream. Give me like 20 minutes and we'll hop on Twitch. And then he links his to Twitch. If anyone's never actually watched Matt Colville's stuff, as much as I disagree with Matt Colville a lot, he is an absolutely... Thank you, computer. That's not what I meant to do. He is an absolutely brilliant dungeon master. He is, I believe he is a writer. I know he wrote. He actually wrote the actual like lore and stuff for at least one game I know of. So he's an author effectively. I don't know if he's actually published a novel, but he works in the writing space. I know he's worked as a writer for video games. He may do other stuff as well. I'm actually going to open up his profile, see if he has a better thing. Yeah, he says, "Hi, I make shit on the internet, mostly dragons or aliens." So he's a writer, and a very talented one. As far as the medium of his writing, I know he does do stuff with RPGs in general. Like he writes supplements and the things like that. And like I said, I know he's written for video games. He wrote the lore for the game Evolve, which crashed and burned, unfortunately, not because of the lore, but because it was a poorly designed game, and then even more poorly marketed. But the lore was fun. The lore is actually kind of interesting. Most people didn't realize there was lore to the game. But the stuff that Matt Colville did was actually pretty cool. I don't want this to come off as me saying like he doesn't know what he's talking about or he's stupid. And no. I think he has this fundamental hang up with what exactly rules in an RPG are designed to do. And it kind of reminds me when I did one of my D&D deep dives recently, I think my most recent one, they all kind of blend together in my brain eventually. I was talking about how one of the subclasses, one of the classes we were talking about, took away from Reckless Attack. They took away the fact that Reckless Attack makes all attacks against you have advantage, thinking that was benefiting Reckless Attack, making it more useful. But the point of Reckless Attack is twofold. Part of it is to make it so barbarians can crit more easily because they're built to be crit machines. They get extra damage when they crit, and they use really big weapons. That's what the class is built around, is big weapons hitting hard. So part of Reckless Attack is designed to help the barbarian just dish out damage the way it's designed to. The other part is the other half of the barbarian. They have the most hit points of any class, and because of their rage, no matter which barbarian you are, when you're raging, you take half damage from effectively physical damage. So, when you use Reckless Attack, it is actually a good thing for enemies to target you, and by making it so that your attacks have or any attacks that get against you have advantage, that gives the enemies an incentive to attack you. A lot of players, and apparently quite a few DMs, don't understand that the second half of Reckless Attack is intentional. It's not meant to be a limiting factor. It is meant to work with the barbarian because the barbarian is designed to take hits. Any physical attack that hits the barbarian instead of, let's say, the wizard is going to be much less useful for the enemy because they're only going to do half damage. And if you're a bear totem barbarian, everything but psychic damage is halved. So even spellcasters casting spells and doing elemental damage against you is going to be somewhat wasted compared to using it on one of your weaker allies. So Reckless Attack is an essential part of the barbarian kit because it increases both aspects of the character. They do more damage and they encourage more enemies to attack them. And that's kind of how I see Matt looking at rules. And I very briefly tuned into his little live stream, and because I came into it midstream, he kept talking about things that he had already explained and would just reference them. And that means that he kept giving more explanations, but because I didn't hear what he initially talked about, I have no idea what any of them mean. So I gave up trying to watch it because I was hoping maybe I misunderstood or something. Again, I didn't think I did because I've seen him go on this little rant before on a different topic, but with the same basic premise of there aren't enough roles. And by the way, that's not how Matt Colville sounds at all. He actually has a very nice speaking voice. But one of the things he said is somebody in chat said, well, how would you do this? Talking about he apparently pitched some sort of rules change. He goes, well, how would you do this? And his answer is, well, that's what designers are for. I don't know how it would work, but that's what designers are for. It's not my job to figure out how it works. It's someone else's job to do that. This is the way that it should work. Someone else has to figure out how it gets that way. And I think that's the issue. It's the same issue that we had during the day off Twitch thing, where you had all these people going, well, this will fix everything. Well, that's not how the system works. Well, then make it work that way. I don't know how you would do it, but that's what programmers are for. I'm not a programmer. I'm a streamer. I should just tell you what to do, and then you make it happen because you're a programmer. It's kind of the same philosophy here. Well, this is the way it should work. Well, it doesn't work that way. And according to how the rules work, as they're written, it can't work that way. You don't actually understand the problem. You've just submitted a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Well, it should work that way. That problem should exist, and then you... this isn't how Matt Colville sounds either. This is my angry person voice. Go watch Matt Colville do something. He has a very nice voice. I feel like I'm getting... I do voices when I talk, and I feel like I'm antagonizing Matt, and I'm not. I'm antagonizing his idea because it's wrong. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that I see. So let's talk about what he says here. So and this is something I was not aware of because I never played original D&D. I know the system relatively well. But because I've never played it, I've never actually had to deal with how you get experience, and I've never actually read that part of any of the books. I don't know how I missed this. I never did. I looked at characters, and I looked at, I know different classes have different experience requirements, and I understand THAC0 and all these other things, and the rolling tables and things like that. But I never actually looked up how you earn experience. I assumed it was like every other iteration of D&D where monster kills get you experience. And from what I'm reading here and what I saw in the brief time I was there, I'm assuming monster kills do actually give you some experience, but gold and finding things give you significantly more. So it was always better to go find good gold than it was to kill monsters, unless those monsters were in front of gold. So so that was something I was unaware of, which is just cool. It's an interesting idea that, but it doesn't. It rewards only one playstyle, and that is where a lot of people that are all rolls are amazing. You need more rolls. That's where they tend to trip up, because when you think that basically the idea between living in a permissive society versus, I can't remember the terms, the U.S. is basically built, our legal system is basically built around the idea of you have things that are illegal, and if it's not illegal, then it's legal. And those are the only two things. Yes, we have morality and things like that. As far as our legal system is concerned, you can do something that's wrong, but it's not illegal, and you are perfectly fine. And because of that, our society has kind of built itself around this idea of if there isn't a law, if there isn't a specific rule against it, then it's okay. And it doesn't only apply to legal laws, but there are other rules, social contracts and things like that, where there are kind of hard rules that that are not actual laws, but people kind of accept them as rules, and so those are rules. And if it's not against the rules, then it's okay. And that's kind of the idea that Matt has shown many other times. There was another thing, I think I made a video on it years ago, where Matt ran on a tirade about people calling D&D a group storytelling game. He's like, it's not a storytelling game. Where's the rule for the denouement? If you are unaware, the denouement is a literature, and before I say the wrong thing, I actually looked up the definition. Now, it's spelt denouement. It's not how you pronounce it. It's denouement. And I think there's an N, so denouement. But I've always pronounced it denouement. And it's actually, this is the description, the final part of a play, movie, or narrative in which the strands of the plot are drawn together and matters are explained or resolved. So it's basically kind of the ending, effectively. Everything comes together. Matt claimed that, it's not a group storytelling system because there are no rules for how to handle the denouement. And since there are no rules for it, it's not a part of the game. No. Just because there aren't any rules for it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There's also no rules in the game about bathroom breaks. It doesn't mean that D&D can't have bathroom breaks. And this is the issue that I get into with a lot of 3E purists, which I do not believe Matt Colville is, but he has a similar mindset that they take. One of the things that they claim is just so great about 3rd edition is there was a rule for everything. And what it turned into was 3E was really great for rules lawyers because there was a rule for everything, and all the rules were very, very specific and pointed. That, especially if you read them as written, there's no way to make a rule for everything. It doesn't exist. There's no way you can make a law for everything. It's impossible because people will always come up with something new. So what happens is the more rules you write, the more problems you will create, because you will create a rule for a specific instance, and you will be thinking about a specific instance as you try to make the rule tailored as narrow as you can to that specific instance. However, you can't make it only that instance. For a rule to actually be effective, it has to be something that applies to multiple instances. A rule for a single instance doesn't make sense and is a waste of time. And so what happens is you make a rule for a specific instance, hoping that it will work for a bunch of different instances, and then a bunch of different instances do happen, and they use that rule, but it doesn't really work with this thing that's similar but slightly different. And then you are either forced to make a new rule for that specific instance, or, as what happened in anyone that's dealt with a rules lawyer in 3rd edition to the D&D generally happens, somebody finds a way to exploit the rule by using it in a way it wasn't intended. So the more rules you create, the easier it is to exploit them. It's one of the reasons why companies like Twitch, for example, or YouTube is another example. It's one of the reasons why they won't specifically explain all the policies that they use to decide if something is appropriate or not. Because as soon as they lay out every single rule, the rules lawyers will come in and go, ha ha, here's a rule against it. You can't ban me. You can't ban me. And so they intentionally leave some things vague to give themselves the ability to make rulings without people taking advantage of the rules. Now, there are other reasons why YouTube doesn't tell people why they ban them, and it has to do with control. We're not going to get into that. But I'm just using that example to show too many rules creates more problems than it solves. Um, most uh, most RPGs after third edition kind of learned the issue with the third edition and started realizing, oh wow, if we make a rule for everything, all it does is it makes the game not fun because the only people that will be able to play are rules lawyers. And rules lawyers make up such a tiny population of RPG players in general um, that you kill off your base. So fourth edition did not have anywhere near as many rules. It had different rules, and it was its own thing. I love fourth edition, but by the way, but it had problems. I will admit that. Um, and then if you go into fifth edition, the entire reason fifth edition is the way it is because they finally learned the lesson. Okay, we don't need a rule for anything. What we need is a simple mechanic that a DM can use to make rulings on the fly so that the DM can customize the game for the players that are playing. And it can create reward structures to reward players for playing the way that they want to or the way that the DM wants to. And it can ignore things that don't incentivize the playstyle that they want. A lot of people have said this over and over and over again. There are a lot of different ways to play D&D. There's a lot of different ways to play RPGs. That's why there are so many. A game of Vampire the Masquerade is going to be so different than a game of Numenera is that they almost cannot be considered the same type of medium. Numenera is a much more rules light system than even did D&D. There are a lot less rules and a lot more of it is left up to GM discretion. The other thing, one of the major incentivizing factors of Numenera is finding these things called ciphers. Ciphers are the system Numenera is built on. It's called the cipher system. And ciphers are basically effectively one use magic items. And the whole purpose behind Numenera specifically and Cypher as a whole is Numenera is set in this world where there was this huge advanced civilization that just disappeared forever ago. And now you go around exploring and trying to find remnants of this past civilization. And you find those in the form of artifacts, which are more like magic items that we're used to, and ciphers. And the thing about Numenera and the cipher system is you are limited to how many ciphers you can hold at any one time. Most classes, or types is what they call them, most types can handle, when they first start, can handle anywhere between about 2 and I think 4 ciphers at any given time. So because you are constantly finding ciphers, and they are one and done use items, the game kind of really incentivizes going out, looking and searching for the things, exactly how Matt is describing it here, using them and then finding them and then using them relatively quickly. And that's kind of what the game incentivizes. Now, does it tie your experience to finding ciphers? Absolutely not. You actually don't get anything for finding ciphers other than getting the ability that the cipher gives you, and some of them are really interesting. But Numenera actually has a bunch of different ways that you can gain experience. One of the ways you can gain experience is by the GM doing a thing called an intrusion, where you do a roll and the GM will intrude on it. Will add something to it that changes what you're doing, generally to make it harder on you. And anytime the GM does a GM intrusion, they give 2 experience points. 1 experience point the player gets to keep that gets the intrusion, and they get to give the other experience point to someone else, anyone else in the group that they want. And the way that you level up in the Cipher system is you have 4 different things you can do every tier, which is equivalent to a level. You can increase your attribute scores effectively. You can increase your edge. Not going to go into what that means. You can gain a skill, and then there's one more thing that I can't remember. But you do those 4 things. Every time you gain a level, the way that you do it is you spend 4 experience points to do one of those 4 things. Every level, you can know each one of those things only once. And once you've done all 4 of those things, you go to the next level, or tier is what it's called in Cypher. And there are only 6 tiers in Cypher. So to go from level 1 to level 2 takes 16 experience points. And to go from level 1 to level 6, you basically have to gain 5 levels. So that's 80 experience points. 80 experience points is the difference between a level 1 character and a max level character in the Cypher system. So it sounds like a pretty short game. Well, no, because experience is a currency in it. You can use experience for a number of things. You can use them for intrusions. You can use experience points to re-roll rolls. You can use experience points to give yourself some sort of a benefit. In the same way the GM can intrude, a player can, and I can't remember the term for it, can give themselves a benefit by burning some of their experience. So you're constantly kind of gaining and losing experience points. And again, one of the ways you can gain experience points is effectively milestone leveling. If you do something big, like and in Numenera, it specifically says if you find something really amazing, give out one of these effectively milestone levels where you just give out 4 experience points to everyone at the end of a session because they did something great. So as you can see, that system does incentivize going out and finding stuff. Does that mean that is the only way to play Numenera? No. Not at all. Again, there are a lot of different ways you can get experience in there. It's not only by finding things, and by making it so you're not tied to this is the only way you can do something, it means that the designers have realized there are multiple ways to play the game. What Matt is talking about here is this idea of the rules are there to make you play the game a certain way, which is a common belief structure. I've seen this many times before. Rules are there to force you to do something. I've had conversations with people when I've been doing this Final Fantasy D&D crossover, where they said, yeah, but the rules don't make you do this, so we need to have a rule that makes you do that. No. Can you do this? Well, yes, but there's nothing that forces you to. Okay, why is that a problem? Well, then how are they going to know they can do that? Because they can. If you force them to play that way, it means they can't play any of these other ways. Well, that's not how I want them to play. Congratulations, then when you play that class, don't play that way. But just because you, the designer, have picked a certain way that you've decided you want this class to be played, doesn't mean that is the only way that class can be played. And if your intention is to make it so that there's only one way to play your class, way to play your game, then you are severely limiting your customer base. You are severely limiting the number of people that are going to play your game, because only one kind of person is ever going to want to play your game. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think I've met a single person in my, I don't know, at least 6 or 7, maybe 8 or 9 years now that I've been doing this. Wow, it's crazy. And all the time I've been doing D&D. And again, I got my start doing D&D running conventions. In Wisconsin, we have a great convention, or we did. We had a great convention circuit where we would have maybe a dozen or so different D&D or RPG conventions every year. And there are a few of us that would do what I called the convention circuit, where what you would do is you would go to a convention, you would run anywhere between about 4 to like 7 or 8 games. They would give you a hotel room for free. They would give you passes for free, and you just had to pay for your incidentals while you were there and getting to it. And it was a really fun thing to do. And I played tons of D&D. Like I said, over a weekend, I would run anywhere between about 4 to 6 games, and then I would play anywhere between about 3 to 5. I literally, from 8 a.m. in the morning until about midnight or 1 o'clock, was doing nothing but playing D&D. or RPGs in general. I would switch it up with other RPGs every so often. But that's all I did for entire weekends. And again, I would do this. I wouldn't go to every single one, but I would do it 5 or 6 times a year, combined with every week at my local Giga Games store. I ran Giga Games, and I did that. Like I learned D&D by playing with thousands of different people from all walks of life. I had people that had played at Gary Gygax's table, and I had people that didn't know what a D20 was at my tables. Sometimes simultaneously, which was always an interesting dynamic. So in all my time playing, I have never found a single player that only plays one way. Even if they always play the same character, there are a few people I've met, they're very, very rare, but there are a few people that always make the same kind of character, or sometimes just make the same character every single time they play anything. And even then, they do not play the exact same way every single time. They do not have the exact same goals. They do not have the exact same rewards that they're looking for. They don't have the same motivations for their characters. I've never met someone that only ever plays one way. And from what Matt has described here and the other issues that I've had with some of his brilliant thoughts that he's had, is this idea, well, the game should force you to play a certain way. He claims that, well, D&D doesn't incentivize you going out and getting magic items, and therefore you can't play that way. Well, no, actually, it does incentivize that. The milestone leveling rule is specifically designed so that you can reward your players however you want. Now, he specifically talks about milestone XP, or really level advancement, but no one calls it that. Aren't you sort of just rewarding players for showing up? No. Milestone XP was specifically designed where when they do something that deserves to be rewarded, they get rewarded. That could be hitting a story beat. It could be finding a dragon hoard full of gold. Like literally the reward system he's talking about, where in order to level up you need to find goals, is already built into 5th edition. You can use milestone leveling to do that. Literally, you cannot gain... milestone leveling gives the reward structure entirely to the DM. And he can tell his players, okay, every time you find a dragon hoard, you will gain a level. And if it wants to, if things are going, to too fast, then it can be, okay, now that you're tier 2, basically the level of the tier. So tier 1 dragon hoard equals 1 level. Tier 2, 2 dragon hordes. Tier 3, 3 dragon hordes. Tier 4, 4 dragon hordes. This is the most inanely simple mechanic possible. It already exists in 5th edition, but because there is not a specific rule that forces you to give players experience for every time they find gold or every time they find magic items, well, then D&D doesn't incentivize that. Yes, it does. It incentivizes it but by allowing the DM to incentivize the things that they want and not incentivize the things that they don't want. Let's say the DM doesn't want to play a treasure hoard campaign or a loot goblin campaign where the players just go around getting stuff and that's their whole motivation. What if the DM wants to run a campaign that's all about political intrigue and trading favors? A real kind of Game of Thrones, this is style campaign. Well, if there is a rule that every time they get a piece of gold, they gain experience, they literally could bypass the entirety of the DM's idea by just going around and stealing shit from people. And they get to level 20 without interacting with anything. Because that rule exists and it forces you to incentivize them by giving them money. What if you want to play in the Dark Sun universe where gold isn't a thing? Metals in general are so precious and so rare that people don't use metal weapons in general, or metal armor. They use chitin and bone and obsidian. Obsidian is glass, effectively. Which I've seen a few things. They do have obsidian knives and arrowheads that they've found. But beyond things like that, obsidian is not a particularly great thing for creating an edge with. It can create a very sharp edge, but it also breaks pretty easily. Anyway, so in a game like in the Dark Sun campaign setting, you can't reward XP for gold because you will never find gold. They do use ceramic pieces for trading and things like that, but Dark Sun is not. The economy in Dark Sun is not the driving force of how you get things. Dark Sun is kind of more similar to Numenera in the idea that there used to be a civilization, and then the gods pieced out, and the planet went to hell. And now all wealth and power is located within the Sorcerer Kings. So if you were playing a Dark Sun campaign in 5th edition, which, by the way, I really want to happen because I love Dark Sun, and they had this rule where XP is tied to gold, you literally could not get anywhere based on the rules of the campaign setting because all the wealth is centralized in the Sorcerer Kings. Even the ceramic pieces and the things like that are extremely limited. The Sorcerer Kings control trade. So just by having that rule, you completely get rid of an entire campaign setting and an entire style of play. The post-apocalyptic style of play, there is no economy. Getting gold is completely worthless. But if there's a rule in D&D that anytime you get gold, you have the way you get experience is by getting gold. You can't play post-apocalyptic settings or any settings where there is no economy. And that's what a lot of people that don't think that think rules, we just need more rules, don't quite understand is this idea of, well, this is the way I want to play, so I'm going to make this rule. They don't understand that, okay, well, now that you've made this rule, it's going to impact so many other things. Well, that's not the way I intended it, so I'm going to make another rule. You will never be able to make enough rules to prevent it from being abused. So the best thing you can do, and that's what 5th edition has done, is give relatively simple ways to empower the DM to incentivize the things that they want. The advantage-disadvantage system is a really, really simple way to incentivize player roles. A lot of people will only use the advantage-disadvantage system if it's hard, you do disadvantage. If it's easy, you do advantage. That's all they'll ever use it for. And that is one of the ways it's just described. However, it can just as easily be used to reward interesting situations. Or you combining the advantage-disadvantage system with the inspiration system. The inspiration system is specifically designed to allow you to incentivize whatever you want. Player comes up with an interesting solution to a puzzle. Hey, take this inspiration. You did something really cool. Player has a really great role-playing moment. Hey, take this inspiration. In the Open Legends system, you have these things that you build that you add to your character creation called flaws. Open Legend has a system similar to inspiration called legend points. Where legend points, you can use a legend point to add advantage to a roll. And in Open Legend, advantage can stack. So you can have advantage 3, advantage 7, advantage 400, whatever. So what happens is if a character does something detrimental to themselves or the party because they're acting on a flaw, like perhaps their flaw is greed. And so the party is in a situation where they've gotten what they need from this place, and now they're going to leave this crumbling temple before they all die. One of the players goes, no, there's a gold cup over there, and I'm going to go get it. Well, that's going to take an additional 2 rounds in there, and the place is collapsing. You may die. Well, my flaw is greed. It's something shiny. I have to go get it. So they're putting the party in a bad place. They're putting their character in a bad place. But they're doing it because that's what their flaw caused them to do. You give them a legend point for that. It's a really simple way to incentivize playing the exact way you want to. And that's what the advantage-disadvantage system, the inspiration system, and the milestone leveling system are built around. Is the idea that DMs can incentivize their players however they want. And it doesn't require creating an entirely new system. It can be as simple as, wow, that was really cool. Take an inspiration point. I want to encourage you for doing that. I want to reward you for doing that, so I'm going to give you an inspiration point. They have in the Dungeon Master's Guide, they have a whole section, and I believe they expand on it in either Tasha's or Xanathar's. They have a whole section for how DMs can award things like feats to players as a kind of special reward. In what was it? The collection of for the life of me, I can't remember what the thing was called. Candlekeep Mysteries. In Candlekeep Mysteries, I ran an adventure where one of the things you got was if you helped these creatures that lived on the back of a dragon turtle, or dragon tortoise actually, because it was landbound. They would give you a permanent benefit to your character. They had a way to give gifts, I think is what they called it. That system already exists in D&D. And Matt actually talked about it in the very brief moment I was able to watch his live stream. He was talking about how, he's talking about dusk elves in this particular thing. And if you go on this side quest, you can get the ability to use dusk arrows. I don't know what any of this was referencing. Again, he was referencing something he talked about earlier. So there's more to this than I understand. But the basics I get from it is dusk arrows are a specific type of arrow that can do a specific type of thing. I don't know what that the thing is, but they act differently than other arrows. And if you go on this little side quest, you get access to this. And that's the only way you can ever use dusk arrows is if you go on this little side quest to do that. He goes, that is a really good system. That system already exists in D&D 5th edition. There's nothing stopping you from giving players proficiency as a reward for doing something. In fact, it's talked about in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They have an entire section about downtime activities and the things like that can very easily be used for that. And like I said, if I remember correctly, it's either Xanathar's or Tasha's. I can never remember which one. Tool proficiencies, adamantine weapons. No, that's Xanathar's. Let's go to Tasha's, see if they have it in here. Matchers, natural hazard, puzzles. The puzzle section was so good. No, I can't remember where it was. But yeah, they already have ways to reward your players and a bunch of things. Oh, here it is. Marks of prestige, supernatural gifts, epic boons. Marks of prestige are role-playing rewards. They're things like letters of recommendation, medals, parcels of land, special favors, special rights, like the ability to use something that would normally be limited to a certain race or something. That could very well be a mark of prestige, which is in the Dungeon Master's Guide. This isn't even something from a later book. This is the Dungeon Master's Guide. Titles, training. Training is one of the marks of prestige. It's training. A character might be offered special training in lieu of a financial reward. This kind of training isn't widely available and thus is highly desirable. It presumes the existence of a skilled trainer, perhaps a retired adventurer or champion who is willing to serve as a mentor. The trainer might be a reclusive wizard or haughty sorcerer who owes the Queen a favor, the Knight Commander of the Knights Guard, the leader of a powerful druid circle, a quirky monk who lives in a remote mountain top pagoda, a barbarian chieftain, a warlock living among nomads as a fortune teller, or an absent-minded bard whose plays and poetry are known throughout the land. A character who agrees to training as a reward must spend downtime with the trainer. See Chapter 6 for more information about downtime activities. In exchange, the character is guaranteed to receive a special benefit. Possible benefits of training include the following. Character gains inspiration daily at dawn for 1d4 plus 6 days. Character gains proficiency in a skill. Character gains a feat. That is just the marks of prestige. There's 2 other things. You have epic boons. Epic boons is something that's designed to reward characters who are 20th level as a way to basically supersede designing more levels. Epic boons are basically leveling up after level to 20. But you have Boon of Combat Prowess. When you miss with a melee weapon attack, you can choose to hit instead. Once you use this boon, you can't use it again until you finish a short rest. Boon of Dimensional Travel. As an action, you cast the Misty Step spell without using any spell slots or any components. Once you do so, you can't use this boon again. As you can see, these are the kind of boons that they have. It is specifically designed only for 20th level characters. Doesn't mean you can only use them for 20th level characters. There's nothing here. There's nothing game breaking about just giving them the Boon of Combat Prowess at level 7. Once a day, you can make a melee weapon attack hit instead of miss. It's not a game breaking thing, but it does make the character feel very powerful, and you can tie it into whatever you did. You know, maybe it's because you were blessed by a god. Maybe it's because you have a magic item that gives you that ability. There's a billion different ways you could do this. Some of the boons might be a little bit overpowered for a 7th level. Like the Boon of High Magic. You gain 1 9th level spell slot provided that you already have one. Well, that one you couldn't do because you don't have 9th level spell slots. But, yeah, I mean, there are all these boons that are built in that if you want to just take them, you can. Or you can modify them in a way that'll work in different situations. Alternatives to epic boons: ability score improvements or a new feat. So that's that. And then let's look at supernatural gifts. You can get blessings. These are different blessings. Blessing of Health. Your Constitution score increases increases by 2, up to a maximum of 22. Blessing of Valhalla. Blessing grants you the power to summon spirit warders, as if you had blown a silver horn of Valhalla. Once you use this blessing, you can't use it again until 7 days have passed. Blessing of Weapon Enchantment. One non-magical weapon in your possession becomes a +1 weapon whenever you wield it. Charms. Charm of Heroism. This charm allows you to give yourself the benefit of a potion of heroism as an action. Once you do so, the charm vanishes from you. Charms are things that are very similar to ciphers. This is an entire section. It's Chapter 7 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, titled Other Rewards. You want to incentivize people for finding gold? Use anything in the Other Rewards section. It already exists in 5th edition. But because there isn't a hard rule that states this is what you have to do, then 5th edition doesn't incentivize it. It does. It incentivizes whatever you want it to incentivize. It's one of the reasons 5th edition is so popular compared to literally any other edition. Every other edition, especially the first one, incentivized only one style of play. 5th edition, now as they got large, as they went on, like 2nd edition, you had multiple styles. 3rd edition, you had somewhat multiple styles, but it was hampered by how many rules it had, and it did very, very heavily incentivize murder hobos. I guess they had hard and fast rules about what gained experience, and the best way to gain experience in third edition was killing things. Like but there was nothing anywhere near as useful as just going around killing shit. Fourth edition had a bunch of different ways. Skills challenges are still some of my favorite things. They were basically, they would give you the same experience as a combat encounter without ever rolling an attack. They were built the same way you build a combat encounter, where you look at the party's levels and then you adjust the challenge levels based on what the party, what level the party is and the average party level. Like, you designed a skills challenge the exact same way you designed a battle encounter. It's one of the things I loved about fourth edition. Fifth edition has that. They have tons of different ways to incentivize different styles of plays, and nobody uses them. And they're right there. Like I said, Chapter 7 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. The Dungeon Master's Guide, I believe, was the second book published. Because I think that the Monster Manual was the third. I'm going to... I want to actually see which one came out first. There's Dragon's Sundering Adventure. There we go. Player's Handbook. No, it's the third book. So you had Player's Handbook in August 19th of 2014. Monster Manual in September. Dungeon Master's Guide in December. So since December 9th of 2014, we are talking about almost 7 years ago. Almost 7 years ago, they had a system for rewarding players for finding treasure already printed. It was a pretty robust system. It had lots of examples, and you could modify them however you want. And yet, almost 7 years later, Matt Colville is complaining because 5th edition doesn't incentivize players finding gold. It's not how it works. It's not how it's ever worked. Again, the mindset of if the system doesn't force you to play a certain way, then the system isn't designed for that is wrong. The idea that, well, this is the way it should work. I don't know how that would ever work, but that's what designers are for. I don't know why I've suddenly turned in to Alex Jones there. Yes, the designers are there to make the game, turn you into a I don't know, turn you into an undead. The games are turning us undead, guys, and they're contacting all the demons through the portals, and Macbeth actually had real spells in it. Like, people don't understand. Macbeth actually had real spells, and every time that you actually do the show and you use the actual words in there, you're actually conjuring demons. That is a really weird voice to do, but I seriously think I need to add at least that voice to one of my adventures, because it's fun. And if anyone has no idea why I just brought up Macbeth, look up why it's called the Scottish play. Just look that up. Read the whole nonsense about Macbeth. It's really interesting. It's a fascinating story, but it is entirely bonkers. And yet there are actors that believe wholeheartedly in the curse of it and will not say, will only refer to it as a Scottish play, always. Anyway, so yeah. I once again find issue with something that Matt Colville says. Matt, if you're watching this, you have made a very poor life choice. There are many better things you could do with your time than watch my almost hour-long rant talking about something you said that was wrong. However, because you have made that very poor life choice, thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. This idea that you seem to fixate on, that in order for a game to incentivize something, it has to force everyone to do it, doesn't make sense. And is severely detrimental to the health and well-being of any game system at all. What you described in the brief time I was able to watch your Twitch stream, where if you take this side quest, you get access to something, and that's the only possible way you could. That is a video game system. And video game systems work really, really well in video games because there is no dungeon master there that can make custom rulings for every instance. Video games have to make hard and fast rules that apply the same way every single time because that's how computers work. Computers can't think abstractly. If we ever get computers that can think abstractly, we're in trouble. So what you're describing is trying to make an RPG, a tabletop RPG, more like a video game, which is fine if you like video games, but you're kind of missing the point of a tabletop RPG, which is every decision the player character makes is going to be impactful if the DM allows it to be. And you're never limited by the choices that the DM has come up with beforehand. In a video game, you are 100% limited by whatever the programmers have decided you might do. Anything they don't program is physically impossible. There's no way to do it. In a tabletop RPG, you can do anything. For example, I was playing an Adventures League module. In the module, you're in an inn that starts on fire. And one of the things you try to do that will affect the reward that you get at the end of the adventure is you have to get as many people out as possible. And they wrote a bunch of different ways to do it. I've actually ran that adventure after I played it. I ran the adventure. They have multiple different doors you can go through. They have rules about how you can calm people down to go orderly, how you can get people out through windows. I was playing a barbarian with a great axe. I decided to make a new door. I told the DM I want to take my great axe and I want to break through the nearest wall. And the DM looked at me like I was nuts. I said, it's a great axe. It's powerful and I am a barbarian that is raging. Theoretically, I can go through these walls. The walls have hit points. They have rules for what walls are. And let's be honest, this is an inn. It's not built up to code that we have now. I should be able to get through a wall. And so I did. And I made a new door. Now, I think I rolled a nat 20 on it, which is why it worked. But that was not a situation anyone had thought of when they wrote the book. There's no way to incentivize people for making their own door. Does that mean that the DM didn't let me do it? No. Does that mean the DM made it easy? No. Again, if I remember correctly, I got either a nat 20 or like a 19 or an 18 on the die while raging, making a strength athletics check. Like that was a big thing. But I was able to do it. In a video game, in a system like you described, there'd be no possible way that could happen because the writers of the module never even thought that someone was going to try and break a wall down. But I did. And it turned into a great story, not only for me, but for the rest of the table. And that is what's so wonderful about 5th edition. There are so many tools in 5th edition that allow you to incentivize anything you want, and they're not complicated. The 3 easiest ones are advantage-disadvantage system, inspiration, DM inspiration, and milestone experience. Anytime you want, you can just give the players a level. Call it milestone experience. You can also give them experience anytime you want for killing monsters. Like you can give them experience for killing monsters. You can also just give them a level. They do that in the hardcover books. They mix milestone leveling and leveling from experience. So it's not that this is something I've created out of my head. It exists and has since, I think they even had systems like that in Tyranny of Dragons. So I I don't understand why you always fixate on the idea of, well, if there isn't a rule for it, that means that you can't. But you need to get out of that mindset, because that's a very video game mindset, which again is great for video games. It's horrible for tabletop RPGs, because no dungeon master can anticipate every single thing a player is ever going to do. Just like no programmer can ever anticipate every single thing a player is going to do. That's where speedrunners get off. Like, if you've ever seen some of the weird stuff they do with speedrunning, one of my buddies speedruns Metroid Dread, and they have a thing called, I think it's called pseudo wave beam, where if you do in a certain section, if you slide one way and then jump up and turn around and fire, it will glitch the system to where your shot actually goes through part of the scenery where it's not supposed to, and can actually hit a switch that will let you skip an entire portion of the game. That's what tabletop RPGs are designed around. Specifically, 5th edition is designed around the idea of, we are going to give the DM as many tools as we can that are really easy to understand and versatile enough that they can incentivize whatever playstyle they want. You want to have a murder hobo cuckoo campaign? Just use the basic experience rules. You want to have a campaign where you're rewarded for finding treasure and things like that? Use use milestone experience and give them a level every time they find a large treasure hoard or something like that. You want to reward people in ways other than their level advancing. There are so many different magic items that give you so many different things. Look at Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Some of the magic items in there are bonkers interesting. And half of them won't make you any better in combat, but they just are so interesting and allow you to do so many interesting things. Fizzbands has a bunch of really cool things. Tasha's Cauldron of Everything has a bunch of really amazing magic items that you can use as rewards for your players. The idea that these rewards don't exist, or there's no way to incentivize going out and finding magic items, doesn't exist. It's not a thing. 5th edition incentivizes so many different play styles. It's bonkers. So please stop fixating on, there isn't a rule for this and there should be. The reason there isn't a rule for this is because it's easy to exploit. A rule that states anytime you get gold, you gain experience is massively easy to exploit. It will basically turn adventures into go kill everything, strip the bodies naked, and go sell everything of value. It will mean that going on a mining expedition is significantly better for character progression than saving a town. It is one of the easiest to exploit systems there is. It's one of the reasons it didn't last very long in D&D. As soon as it started getting updated, that was thrown away. I don't know why this makes me so angry, but it annoys the hell out of me when people complain about a system not having features that it already has, that exist already in the system. And then their solution for a problem that doesn't exist is to create this massively complicated solution that is easily exploitable because of the complexity of it. And that is exactly what you've done here. So, yeah, Matt, you are a brilliant mind. You are a phenomenal dungeon master. I love the 4E campaign that you're doing with Dale. I consider Dale to be an acquaintance. I adore Dale. I have no idea if she even likes me, but I adore Dale. I think she's wonderful. And I don't get to watch it much, but that 4E campaign I love every second that I do get to watch for it. You are brilliant. Which is why it surprised me so much that you massively miss the billboards in front of your face while you're inspecting a weed on the roadside. D&D has all the systems it needs to be able to do exactly what you're describing. The systems already exist in 5th edition. You just have to know about them and use them. And the easiest way to do that is to read the first book that was designed solely for Dungeon Masters. You might call it the second book because monster manuals generally tend to be for Dungeon Masters, but it's been out for almost 7 years. These systems have existed for 7 years. Come on, dude. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, whatever. I had to get this off my chest. New D&D Deep Dive tomorrow. Bye.